For more than 4,000 years, a single question has haunted historians, archaeologists, and explorers: how does a city that once ruled the known world vanish without leaving a single stone behind? Akkad, capital of the first great empire in human history, was once the beating heart of Mesopotamia. Its armies marched from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean. Its kings carved their names into clay tablets, proclaiming victories that reshaped the ancient world. Its influence spread across deserts, mountains, and rivers. And yet today, no one knows where it stood. How does the city of Sargon the Great, the man who forged history's first empire, simply disappear from the earth? What catastrophe was so powerful, so sudden, that the very location of his capital was erased? Was it war, or was it climate, or was it rebellion from within? Or was it something far more mysterious, something the ancient scribes were too afraid to record? Every clue we have comes in fragments: a line on a crumbling tablet, a broken inscription praising gods long forgotten, a name etched into clay thousands of years before the first pyramid reached the sky. Akkad is everywhere in ancient memory, and nowhere in the archaeological record. Why did the Sumerians write that the storm was unleashed upon Akkad? What was this storm they described? Was it literal, or a coded warning preserved through myth? How could the most advanced city of its age, rich, powerful, fortified, fall so completely that not a single traveler in later centuries could point to its ruins? And perhaps the most chilling question of all: if an empire so mighty can disappear without a trace, how many more civilizations have been erased, their stories lost beneath the sands of time? As we journey into the world of Akkad, we step into a landscape where fact and legend intertwine. We will walk the riverbanks where its people lived, trace the rise of its kings, and follow the trail of shattered evidence that hints at its final days. We will uncover the myths, the archaeology, the political drama, and the environmental forces that may have brought the world's first empire to its knees. This is not just a story about a lost city. It is a warning from the deep past. A reminder that even the greatest civilizations can fall. And a mystery that, despite centuries of searching, remains unsolved. Where was Akkad? What destroyed it? And why has the earth itself hidden its remains? No one living today has ever seen Akkad. No ruins rise from its plains, no walls remain to cast a shadow at sunset, and no traveler has ever discovered a stone bearing its name. Yet history remembers it as the heart of one of the world's first true empires. The lost city of Akkad lives in fragments, scattered inscriptions, half-remembered kings, and echoes of victory carved into clay tablets. But if we push back through time, beyond the dust of nearly 5,000 years, we find a people emerging from the great alluvial plains of Mesopotamia, where two ancient rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, shaped both landscapes and destinies. Akkad's story begins long before the city itself existed. In the 3rd millennium BCE, the region of Mesopotamia was a mosaic of rival city-states, Uruk, Ur, Lagash, Umma, and Kish. Each had its own gods, its own rulers, its own ambitions. Warfare between these city-states was common, sometimes over borders, sometimes over irrigation canals, and sometimes simply over honor. For centuries, this patchwork held firm. No single city seemed destined to dominate the others. But the land itself was changing. The rivers shifted, fields expanded, populations grew, and political tension simmered. The cities of Sumer in the south relied heavily on skilled agriculture and religious authority, while the Akkadians to the north, Semitic-speaking peoples, lived closer to nomadic roots but increasingly integrated into Mesopotamian life. These Akkadians spoke a language that would later become the basis for diplomatic and literary texts across the Near East. Somewhere in this melting pot, a new force began to rise. Into this fractured landscape came a man whose origins still inspire both scholarly debate and mythic storytelling, Sargon of Akkad. His birth story reads like a legend. According to later texts, he was born to a priestess, set adrift in a basket on the Euphrates, and found by a gardener who raised him as his own. Whether this was political propaganda or a poetic attempt to frame his rise as divinely guided, the imagery is powerful and deeply symbolic. Sargon represented a break in tradition, a ruler who did not inherit power but seized it. Before Sargon founded his empire, he served as cupbearer to the king of Kish, a position of trust and proximity to power. But the details of how he overthrew his master and began conquering the cities of Mesopotamia remain lost. What we do know is that within a few decades, Sargon unified a region that had remained divided for centuries. He did what no king before him had accomplished. To understand Akkad's geography, we must reconstruct the world as it existed thousands of years ago. The city of Akkad itself has not been found, but most scholars believe it lay somewhere between modern-day Baghdad and the ancient city of Sippar, near the northern edge of Sumer. This was a strategic location, far enough north to connect with trade routes and nomadic populations, yet close enough to the rich agricultural lands that sustained the southern cities. It was a crossroads, a place where cultures blended and ambitions amplified. No surviving ancient text describes the city's appearance, but we can imagine it from parallels. Akkad would have been built from sun-dried mud brick, its streets winding between temples, administrative buildings, and common homes. Its ziggurat, dedicated perhaps to Ishtar, whom the Akkadians favored, may have towered above the city. Markets would have bustled with traders bringing tin from Anatolia, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, cedar from Lebanon, and grain from the southern farmlands. Akkad was not merely a capital, it was a symbol, a new center of gravity in a world long dominated by Sumerian cities to the south. As Akkad grew in power, it transformed the political landscape. Sargon created what historians often call the world's first empire, stretching from the Persian Gulf in the south to the Mediterranean Sea in the west. He established garrisons, appointed governors, and enforced loyalty through both military strength and political alliances. The old Sumerian kings found their autonomy replaced by imperial control. With power came the need for legitimacy. Akkadian scribes recorded victories, religious dedications, and royal achievements on clay tablets. The king's daughter, Enheduanna, wrote hymns that have survived as some of the earliest known authored texts in history. Through her writings, Sargon's dynasty connected itself to the gods, especially to Inanna or Ishtar, the powerful goddess of love and war. Akkad's empire was not only political, it was ideological. But every empire begins somewhere, and Akkad's rise was not an overnight phenomenon. It emerged from centuries of cultural blending and geopolitical tension. The Akkadians, once peripheral, learned from their Sumerian neighbors, adopting writing, agricultural techniques, irrigation methods, and religious structures, until they were ready to assert their own power. When Sargon struck, the world was ripe for unification. Archaeology supports this gradual integration. Clay tablets found in cities across Mesopotamia show increasing Akkadian names in administrative roles long before Sargon's conquests. Artifacts such as cylinder seals reveal a fusion of styles, like in Sumerian motifs combined with Akkadian symbolism. The cultural transition was already underway, Sargon simply accelerated it. The story of the lost city of Akkad begins here, with a people on the rise, a legendary king forging an empire, and a city whose foundations once stood at the heart of the ancient world. Though its remains are hidden beneath centuries of shifting earth and forgotten rivers, Akkad endures in the memory of history. Before we explore its golden age, its achievements, and its final disappearance, we must first understand the forces that gave birth to it, a dawn in the dust, a beginning that would reshape the destiny of Mesopotamia. To understand the true power and mystery of Akkad, we must follow the life of the man who transformed it from an obscure settlement into the capital of the world's first empire. His name, Sargon, echoes through clay tablets like thunder from a forgotten age. But the story of his rise is not one carved into monuments of stone. It is a tale whispered in fragments, half legend, half history, shaped by myth and political memory. It begins not in a palace, but in the shadows. The ancient text known as the Legend of Sargon gives us our first glimpse into his origins. According to this remarkable account, Sargon was born to a priestess, possibly a woman forbidden from raising children due to religious vows. She hid her newborn in a basket coated with pitch and set it afloat on the Euphrates. The baby drifted downriver until a gardener discovered him and raised him as his own. The imagery is unmistakable, echoing later stories, from Moses to Romulus. While historians debate its authenticity, the symbolism is undeniable. Sargon's life began outside the traditional structures of power, yet fate carried him toward greatness. By the time he enters historical record, Sargon is an accomplished figure serving as cupbearer to the king of Kish. This role was far more significant than the name suggests. The cupbearer was not merely a servant, he stood close to the king, responsible for his safety and privy to political secrets. It was a position of trust, and likely one that put Sargon in direct contact with military commanders, diplomats, and priests. Through this role, he learned the pulse of Mesopotamian politics, its rivalries, its ambitions, its vulnerabilities. Something in the palace of Kish set events into motion. Perhaps the king became weak. Perhaps Sargon saw corruption he believed he could challenge. Perhaps rival factions pushed him toward rebellion. What we do know is that Sargon overthrew his old master and declared himself ruler. The city-states of Mesopotamia had seen war before, but they had not seen anything like Sargon's ambition. From the moment he seized power, Sargon envisioned more than local dominance. He moved swiftly against the Sumerian cities to the south and subjugated them one by one. These were cities with ancient dynasties, religious prestige, and deep-rooted pride. Yet Sargon's forces overwhelmed them. His victory over Lugal-Zagizi, the powerful king of Umma who had briefly united Sumer, gave Sargon command over all southern Mesopotamia. But conquest was only the beginning. Sargon did something unheard of. He moved his capital north, away from the old Sumerian centers of power, and established it somewhere in the region between Kish and Sippar, at a place called Akkad. Whether he chose an existing settlement or built a new one is still debated, but the symbolism is clear. Akkad was meant to be the beating heart of a new political order. It represented a break from the past, a neutral ground between cultures, and a fresh center from which Sargon could rule. The geography of this region was ideal. The land between the Tigris and Euphrates provided fertile fields for agriculture, easy access to trade routes toward both the north and west, and a strategic vantage point to monitor Sumerian elites in the south and nomadic tribes in the desert fringes. By positioning his capital here, Sargon ensured he could control movement across the entire region. It was a brilliant political and military decision, one that helped stabilize his expanding empire. Sargon strengthened his rule through innovation. He created a standing army, a permanent military force that could respond rapidly to threats. He introduced a system of governors, loyal officials appointed to rule conquered cities. These measures were revolutionary in a world where local rulers typically held strong autonomy. Through these reforms, Sargon centralized power in a way no previous king had attempted. The empire stretched farther with each campaign. Sargon expanded westward into modern-day Syria, reaching the Mediterranean coastline. He marched north toward the Taurus Mountains, securing trade routes essential for tin and precious stones. He captured the city of Mari, a major cultural and commercial hub, and subdued Elam to the east. Within decades, his domain covered more territory than any political entity before it. The world had never seen such unity. But to maintain this vast realm, Sargon needed more than military force. He needed divine legitimacy. He turned to religion, and to his daughter, Enheduanna, whom he appointed as high priestess of the moon god Nana in Ur. Through her role, she unified Sumerian religious tradition with Akkadian royal authority. Enheduanna's hymns, some of the world's earliest surviving literary works, strengthened the bond between the empire and its gods. She praised Inanna, Ishtar in Akkadian belief, as the divine force behind Sargon's victories. The empire's ideology took shape. The king ruled not through birthright, but through divine favor. Archaeology gives us glimpses of this era. Clay tablets bearing Sargon's name have been found in cities across Mesopotamia, sometimes far beyond the borders of his empire. Administrative records show standardized weights and measures, evidence of a highly organized economy. Cylinder seals depict scenes of kingship, warfare, and religious rituals, blending Sumerian tradition with emerging Akkadian style. Although the capital itself remains lost, its influence is visible everywhere. By the time Sargon's reign reached its height, Akkad had become the center of the world, a place where armies marched out, caravans arrived with goods from distant lands, scribes recorded the empire's triumphs, and priests offered sacrifices to gods who now favored a new dynasty. The lost city of Akkad stood as the symbol of a new order, an empire forged in shadow by a man whose origins blurred the line between legend and reality. But every ascent casts a shadow. And as Sargon's power grew, so did the challenges that would one day threaten the stability of the empire he built. Before the city of Akkad rose, before an empire stretched across rivers and deserts, before the world learned the meaning of imperial power, there was simply a child, unwanted, unnamed, and floating on a river. A legend that feels strangely familiar. According to the ancient tablets, Sargon of Akkad began his life not as a prince, but as a secret. His mother, a high priestess bound to vows of purity, could not keep him. In desperation or hope, she placed the infant in a basket of reeds and set him adrift on the Euphrates. The river carried him to the hands of Aki the gardener, an ordinary man who raised the abandoned child as his own. In the ancient world, destiny usually favored sons of kings. Sargon was the son of no one. And yet, from the beginning, his story refused to follow the rules. Sargon's early life unfolded inside the palace of Kish, where he served as a cupbearer, an attendant trusted with tasting the king's wine and ensuring it was safe. But the role was more than ceremonial. A cupbearer lived close to the heartbeat of power. He listened. He learned. He watched how kings ruled and how they failed. Every day, Sargon walked through halls where bronze weapons gleamed and clay tablets carried the weight of royal decrees. He heard generals whisper about rival city-states, merchants argue about trade routes, and priests debate the will of the gods. He absorbed everything. But to rise higher, he needed something the rarely granted, an opportunity. It came when Kish fell into political chaos, exactly the kind of fracture that creates either tyrants or legends. Sargon chose the latter. How he seized power is a story lost to time, but ancient chronicles speak of a sudden and decisive rise. One moment he was a servant, the next, a king in all but name. Even his enemies admitted it. Sargon's advance was unstoppable, like a storm rolling in from beyond the horizon. Sargon did not rule a city-state. He created something larger. Mesopotamia before him was a patchwork of competing cities, each clutching its own traditions, gods, and grudges. The idea of a single ruler governing them all was radical, even unthinkable. Sargon made it real. The tablets describe conquest after conquest, a chain of victories etched into clay. By the time the dust settled, Sargon controlled a landmass so vast that the scribes had to invent new ways to describe it. He became king of the four quarters, a title suggesting not just dominance, but dominion over the entire known world. But Sargon did something even more revolutionary. He built a capital that could match the scale of his ambition, Akkad. Unlike most ancient cities, Akkad did not grow slowly from a village or fishing settlement. Sargon declared its creation by decree, summoning a city into existence through political will, military might, and divine justification. He placed it not along a river's bend or on a sacred mound, but in a location intentionally chosen to break old power structures. Akkad's position remains unknown today, but scholars believe it lay somewhere between Babylon and modern Baghdad, where the Tigris and Euphrates run closest. Why there? Because it was a crossroads. Merchants could reach it. Armies could deploy from it. Messages could spread across the empire with unprecedented speed. Akkad became both a fortress and a symbol, a living monument to Sargon's authority. Inside its walls, scribes copied laws and treaties. Artisans crafted weapons, jewelry, and ceremonial masks. Priests performed rituals that united the empire's diverse gods under the supremacy of Ishtar, Sargon's divine patron. Akkad was not just a city. It was a political experiment, and it worked. But power invites rebellion. Revolts erupted in cities Sargon had once conquered. Drought strained the empire's resources. Enemies from the mountains tested the borders. A man who had risen from nothing now faced the burden of holding everything together. According to legend, Sargon prayed for relief, asking the gods for another 50 years of rule. He got them. His reign stretched longer than many dynasties. But even the greatest kings must eventually fall. When Sargon died, he left behind more than a kingdom. He left an idea that a single ruler could unite diverse lands under one banner. The concept of empire, which would shape human history for millennia, began with him. His sons and grandsons inherited his throne. His grandson Naram-Sin achieved even greater heights, declaring himself a living god, a move that would define the next chapter of Akkad's story. But for all his achievements, Sargon could not predict the final fate of the city he built. Akkad would one day vanish so completely that not even its ruins could be found. And that disappearance, more than his victories, more than his empire, is what transformed the archaeology has ever faced. The tale of Sargon is a contradiction of fate. A child who should have died became the first great empire builder in history. A man with no lineage created a dynasty that reshaped ancient Mesopotamia. A king who built the greatest city of his age left behind almost nothing of it. Everything about Sargon challenges our expectations, except one thing: his story is far from over. Sargon had done the impossible. He unified a region long divided by rivalries, war, and centuries-old grudges. But conquest alone does not create an empire. To transform Akkad from a city into a civilization that could endure, he and his successors faced a far greater challenge: how to govern, sustain, and legitimize power over a vast and diverse population. Before Akkad, Mesopotamian city-states were largely autonomous. Kings ruled their own people and obeyed their own gods. The idea that a single ruler could command multiple cities, with different traditions, languages, and economies, was revolutionary. Sargon's solution was both pragmatic and innovative. He appointed governors, men of loyalty rather than lineage, to oversee each city. These governors acted as extensions of the king's authority, ensuring that local leaders could not stage rebellions. The empire's bureaucracy was sophisticated. Clay tablets from distant cities show standardized weights, measures, and accounting systems. Grain deliveries were meticulously recorded, tax obligations were clearly defined, and trade agreements were enforced by imperial decree. Akkad's administration resembled a well-oiled machine, capable of coordinating everything from harvests along the Euphrates to military campaigns on distant frontiers. Akkad's army was more than a defensive force, it was the backbone of the empire. Unlike previous city-states, which raised militias for seasonal campaigns, Sargon maintained a standing army, permanently stationed at strategic locations. Soldiers were trained, disciplined, and loyal to the central authority. Armies could be deployed rapidly, suppressing rebellions and protecting trade routes. Military innovation extended beyond numbers. Siege techniques, river crossings, and mobile units allowed Akkad to conquer territories far beyond the Tigris and Euphrates floodplains. By combining force with diplomacy, Sargon expanded his empire without destroying the economic foundations that sustained it. Control over resources was vital to the empire's stability. Akkad commanded fertile agricultural lands in southern Mesopotamia and controlled northern trade routes connecting Mesopotamia to Anatolia, the Levant, and the Zagros Mountains. The empire imported tin from Anatolia for bronze production, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, cedar from Lebanon, and gold from Egypt and Nubia. Markets within Akkad thrived. Artisans produced pottery, textiles, jewelry, and ceremonial objects. Caravans carried goods across deserts, while riverboats navigated the Tigris and Euphrates, linking distant regions. The economic strength of Akkad was inseparable from its political authority. Wealth both sustained the army and reinforced the king's divine legitimacy. Sargon understood that power needed more than administration and armies, it required the gods. Religion in Akkad was both a tool of unity and a symbol of divine favor. Priests served multiple gods, blending Sumerian and Akkadian pantheons, while state rituals reinforced the authority of the king. The appointment of Sargon's daughter, Enheduanna, as high priestess, exemplified this integration of religion and politics. Her hymns celebrated the king's victories and praised deities in a manner that bound spiritual authority to imperial rule. This combination of faith and governance strengthened Akkad's claim to legitimacy across cultures and languages. Culturally, Akkad was a melting pot. Its capital became a center for literature, administration, art, and architecture. Cylinder seals, small engraved cylinders used to sign documents, depicted military victories, religious rituals, and royal decrees. These objects spread Akkadian artistic style across the empire, standardizing imagery while preserving local motifs. Literature flourished. Enheduanna's hymns were groundbreaking, marking the earliest known examples of individual authorship. They reveal a society that valued not only conquest but also intellectual and spiritual expression. Akkad thus became more than a political power, it became a cultural beacon. While we have not located the ruins of Akkad itself, the organization of contemporary Mesopotamian cities provides clues. The city likely contained residential quarters, administrative centers, and grand temples. Roads connected Akkad to surrounding towns, facilitating trade, communication, and rapid military deployment. Irrigation canals supported agriculture, ensuring the empire's food supply and sustaining large urban populations. The urban design reflected both pragmatism and prestige. Akkad needed to accommodate thousands of residents while projecting power through monumental structures. Its streets, marketplaces, and ceremonial spaces embodied the empire's central authority, even if the exact layout remains a mystery. Yet even this sophisticated system faced pressures. Governing distant territories, integrating diverse populations, and maintaining loyalty over generations was a constant struggle. Revolts occasionally erupted in cities far from the capital. Environmental stress, drought, flooding, and shifting river courses threatened food supplies. Even with Sargon's genius, the empire was a delicate balance of power, faith, and resources. Despite these challenges, Akkad's innovations would influence later empires for millennia. Administrative systems, imperial ideology, and the concept of a standing army became models for Babylon, Assyria, Persia, and beyond. The idea that one ruler could unite disparate peoples under centralized authority was born here, on the plains of Mesopotamia, nearly 5,000 years ago. The empire reached its peak under Sargon and his grandson, Naram-Sin, whose reign combined military conquest with claims of divinity. But even as the empire flourished, ominous signs appeared: climate fluctuations, political unrest, and foreign invasions hinted that Akkad's golden age would not last forever. And yet, for a brief moment in history, Akkad stood as the center of the world, a city and an empire that demonstrated the power of human ambition, the ingenuity of administration, and the force of cultural integration. It was a civilization that redefined what a city could be, what a king could achieve, and what an empire could endure. The Empire of Akkad, forged by Sargon, was unlike anything the world had seen. It stretched from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean, its influence radiating across deserts, mountains, and rivers. Yet empires, like the rivers that nourish them, are rarely constant. Power shifts, dynasties rise and fall, and the foundations of greatness are tested. For Akkad, that moment came under the reign of Sargon's grandson, Naram-Sin, a ruler whose ambition, divinity, and legacy would define the empire at its zenith. Naram-Sin inherited more than an empire, he inherited a legacy. Sargon had unified Mesopotamia, established systems of governance, and created Akkad, a capital city whose location still puzzles modern scholars. But maintaining an empire is always more difficult than building one. Revolts simmered in the southern cities, trade routes were vulnerable, and neighboring tribes remained a constant threat. From the beginning, Naram-Sin's rule was marked by both military brilliance and religious innovation. Unlike his grandfather, who relied heavily on existing Sumerian religious frameworks, Naram-Sin claimed divinity for himself. He presented himself not merely as the king of Akkad but as a living god, a bold assertion that blurred the lines between humanity and the divine. Inscriptions carved into steels depict him wearing the horned helmet of the gods, standing taller than mountains and trampling enemies beneath his feet. Was this arrogance? Or a necessary demonstration of authority? Scholars debate the meaning, but the message was clear: Naram-Sin was the ultimate ruler, chosen by the gods, and unrivaled on earth. Under Naram-Sin, Akkad reached its greatest territorial extent. The empire pushed north into the Zagros Mountains, subdued the Gutians who had threatened the empire's stability, and extended influence into Syria and the Levant. Military campaigns were meticulously recorded on stone and clay, offering both warnings to enemies and validation to citizens. One famous stele, the Victory Stele of Naram-Sin, depicts a mountainous landscape with the king towering over fallen soldiers, arrows piercing their ranks, while celestial symbols hover above him. The imagery conveys not just conquest, but the cosmic endorsement of his rule. Naram-Sin's armies were not merely instruments of war, they were expressions of divine will, a manifestation of Akkad's reach and the king's authority. Naram-Sin inherited the bureaucratic structures established by Sargon but expanded them to manage a larger and more diverse empire. Governors oversaw distant cities, trade networks flourished, and taxation systems ensured resources flowed to Akkad. Standardized weights and measures facilitated commerce, while scribes documented every decree, trade transaction, and tribute paid. This centralized administration allowed the empire to endure even in the face of natural disasters and internal unrest. Akkad, at its height, functioned almost like a modern state, coordinated, hierarchical, and efficient. Citizens, soldiers, and artisans were all bound to the capital through loyalty, necessity, and religion. While Akkad's military might is often celebrated, its cultural achievements were equally significant. The empire fostered a flowering of literature, art, and religious thought. Enheduanna's hymns, composed under Sargon, continued to influence the empire's religious culture, while new texts celebrated Naram-Sin's divine kingship. The fusion of Sumerian and Akkadian traditions created a shared cultural identity across the empire. Temples honored both local and imperial gods, creating a sense of unity while respecting regional practices. Art and iconography, from cylinder seals to monumental reliefs, reinforced the message of Akkad supremacy. Even distant regions adopted Akkadian administrative language, facilitating communication and governance. Religion was central to imperial ideology. Naram-Sin's claim to divinity was revolutionary. By presenting himself as chosen by the gods, he sought to make rebellion not just political treason, but sacrilege. In a world where divine approval legitimized kingship, this elevated the stakes of power and created an aura of invincibility around Akkad's rulers. Even at its height, the empire faced challenges. Some regions, particularly on the fringes, resisted central authority. The Gutians, long a source of tension, remained a persistent threat. Environmental pressures, droughts, river shifts, and the depletion of farmland, strained agricultural production. These factors, combined with the difficulties of managing distant territories, meant that Akkad's dominance, while impressive, rested on fragile foundations. Ancient texts hint at foreboding omens. Some describe the gods' anger at the king's hubris, foreshadowing the eventual collapse of the empire. The very monuments that celebrated victory also preserved warnings, like echoes of a future no one wanted to imagine. Akkad's grandeur carried the seeds of its vulnerability. Despite the challenges, Naram-Sin's reign represented the pinnacle of Akkad's power. He demonstrated that a single ruler could command an unprecedented swath of territory, integrate diverse peoples under centralized authority, and fuse political, religious, and cultural influence into a coherent imperial identity. The empire under Naram-Sin became a model for future civilizations. Babylon, Assyria, and later empires would draw inspiration from Akkad's administrative structures, military organization, and ideological integration. Yet unlike later cities, Akkad would not endure in stone. Its capital would vanish, leaving behind inscriptions and myths as the sole witnesses to its brilliance. At its peak, Akkad likely thrived with bustling markets, grand temples, and ceremonial avenues. Riverboats carried grain and trade goods, while soldiers and officials ensured order. The city's architecture, though lost to time, would have reflected the empire's scale, administrative complexes, monumental religious structures, and neighborhoods for citizens of every social rank. Though no ruins survive, the empire's influence was tangible in its extensive reach, centralized governance, and cultural imprint. For a time, Akkad was untouchable. The king was divine, the army invincible, and the administration flawless. It was the world's first true empire, a civilization that set precedents still recognized thousands of years later. But even at its height, the seeds of decline had already been planted. Environmental stress, political tension, and external threats foreshadowed a future in which even this seemingly immortal city would face an uncertain fate. As we reflect on Akkad at its zenith, the questions linger: how could such a powerful city, so strategically located and so culturally advanced, disappear almost entirely from history? Did Naram-Sin's claim to divinity sow the seeds of revolt or divine punishment? Could environmental factors alone have undermined a city of such sophistication? The story of Akkad's peak is also a story of human ambition, the desire to rule, to unify, and to leave a mark on the world. The empire reached heights that seemed untouchable, yet history teaches that even the mightiest empires are vulnerable. In the next chapter, we will follow the beginning of Akkad's decline, the threats that arose after Naram's sin, and the forces, both human and natural, that led to the empire's eventual disappearance.